Welcome, everyone. We are back on episode two on Two Sinners on a Sunday. How you doing, Ali?
I'm good. I'm good.
A recap on last week. That was an introduction to myself.
Evans.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. I think I definitely also learned a lot about you that I didn't know. And I thought that you were very fair in your description of some of the things that you've said. And I hope to do the same today with sharing a little bit of my backstory. So,
which is what we're
so.
going to be doing today, guys. So today is Ali's turn to give us a sweet walkthrough, a walk down the
Yeah.
memory lane
Yes. Yeah.
of her experience
Of my
at
life.
home as a young, innocent Mormon child.
Yes, yes, exactly. All right, I'll just go right into it. So, as Evan said, I was raised Mormon, so that's my religious background. I was born in Italy. My father is Italian, my mother's American. My mother was a missionary for the Mormon church. That's not how she met my dad, but it was because she served in Italy. She went back a little while after her mission concluded, and that's where she and my dad met. And they lived in Italy for, I think, about 10 years of their marriage. But when I was 14 months old, my mom and dad were in a car accident. And this car
Oh,
accident left my mom paralyzed. My dad was able to walk away from the accident with just like a bloody nose and I think broken glasses and a missing shoe, I think is the story. My mom, on the other
oh
hand,
wow.
she was ejected from the vehicle and the vehicle turned three times. And one of those times she was ejected from, I think, the front window. And unfortunately, that left and created three lesions in her brain, which
Oh,
led to her paralysis. And so, pretty much, the only mom I knew was one that was paralyzed.
oh wow.
And yeah, it was a pretty bad accident because they had to, what is it when they have to cut a hole in your throat to get you to breathe? Like, have
Right.
you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of that. I just don't know
Like,
the name.
I,
Yeah.
I think it's like something like with a trach or something. I don't know the name
Right,
either.
right.
I probably should have looked it up
You
beforehand.
should have done your
But
research
I
on
know.
your
I
own
should have prepared.
backstory.
I know my own story. But they had to, like it was really bad. They didn't think she was gonna make it, but she did. And because I was so little, I wasn't allowed to see my mom for many, many months while she was in the hospital. And so I kind of grew closer to my grandma. My dad's mom came to help. And so I kind of grew attached to my grandma and my sister. I have one older sister, and
Mm,
she was about 2.5 years older than me. So she was able to go visit my mom. And so I think for her, that period, at least, she was able to see my mom. I grew closer to my grandma, and to this day, I mean, I love my grandma. She's passed also,
mm.
but she was awesome. I loved that woman,
Sorry about that.
and she was very good. Yeah, she died, I want to say 8 years ago, so it's been a while. But she's a
Mm.
sweetheart, one of those people that, well, yeah, she just is just one of those people that was always good to me, and I will
Mm.
always remember that. But yeah, so grew up so I lived in Italy until I was about 7 years old. And at that point, I think my parents just got as far as they could get with her handicap because Italy's, thousands, millennia old, and it's just not very handicap friendly.
Mm.
And the
I
United States
see.
obviously is only about, just a few hundred years old. And so it's just advantages, the benefits just
Yeah.
would make it easier for her. Plus, my mom's parents lived in the United States, so if anything were to have happened to my dad, he knew that, we would have some support. And so they made the decision to move to the United States. And so I was 7 and I was in the second grade. So I pretty much have an American education because I grew up in the United States. And
Oh,
we moved to Utah, which is kind of the Mecca for Mormonism. And
oh,
it's kind of like the opposite, where if you're Catholic, the Mecca is Italy. For me, for my family, Utah was kind of like the Holy Land.
so were
So yeah.
they during this time? Were your parents part of the Latter-day
Yes.
Saints of
Yes.
Jesus?
So
Okay.
my dad joined the church at 22, if I'm remembering the story correctly. He was young. He actually grew up Catholic, just like the majority of the people in Italy
Okay.
do. And he wanted to be a priest. So his family, his little village, sent him to Rome to study at the Vatican. And I believe it was
Wow.
from 11 to 16 for 5 years. He studied at
Wow.
the Vatican. He was going to be the next pope. And that
Interesting.
was, yeah, so that's what he was going to do. Then it just didn't resonate with him. And so his sister came to get him around the age of 16. He came home and he went to work and school, and he is a very talented artist, graphic designer. And that's kind of what he did. And around the age of 22, the Mormon missionaries were in his area, and he went through the process of converting to the Mormon faith.
Ah,
And that was at
okay.
22. And he was in the faith for about 10 years before he and my mom got married. So it wasn't for almost a decade after that he met my mom. They got married and had my sister, and then they had me. And then obviously because of the car accident, the that was it with the family. It was just the two of us, girls. So that's my dad. My mom, on the other hand, born and raised in the faith, I would say at least a couple of generations strong. The faith was everything to my mom. She was a very strict Mormon, and that was kind of my upbringing. Even though, she was paralyzed, I mean, in fact, I don't know how she was before the car accident, but she was definitely very strict, very
Oh,
much. There was no wiggle room on any of the church's rules. And I know you've been watching videos here and there, Evans, about different things that the
yeah.
church, some of the rules, but my mom was letter, to the T. So like,
Wow.
for example, when you get to a certain age in the faith, and we can do a whole episodes on the Mormon underwear,
Definitely.
but the Mormon underwear covers you pretty much down to your knee. And I remember that
Oh,
most children, because they're not wearing this underwear, their parents would let them just wear regular shorts. Not my mom. My mom made sure that whatever we wore covered us as if we were already fully grown adults wearing the Mormon underwear. So just very strict. So no tank tops
wow.
and nothing, like no bikini, no, just fully covered at all times. We never had, and so she was very strict. That's just one example, but absolutely like no swearing, no shopping on Sunday. Yeah, just very, very strict with all the rules. And how she even taught to us was, or at least I don't want to speak for my sister's experience, but my experience was she basically spoke in scripture. I mean, anytime she had an
Right.
opportunity to recite verse or
Yeah.
to use even scripture against us or
Mm-hmm.
against me, it was like take the beam out of your eye before, like in
Right.
every possibility. And so it was almost like a trump card,
Yeah.
where you couldn't say anything after the scriptures come out. So
Yeah.
that's how my mom operated. And I mean, in all fairness, I know she believed it and she thought it was the truth. And so she just doubled down like crazy.
Yeah, and also
Another,
with
yeah,
with the Mormon belief, I think it's very different to many other Protestant type of Christian beliefs, and even Orthodox
sure.
structured beliefs, which is being
Yeah.
saved by simple belief in Jesus Christ, right?
Yes.
I
No.
think, yeah, it's very different
Yeah.
because there you
It's very
have to
different.
adhere to the rules strictly. Not
Mm-hmm.
only you have to make sure your
Mm-hmm.
family adheres to the rules, your wife, your
Yeah.
husband, your children,
Correct.
and that places you in specific place lines of heaven as well,
Yes.
depending on
Yes.
how you observe the
Yes.
rules, right?
Good job,
Interesting.
Evans. Like, we really can tear this apart
Oh
later,
yeah,
but it's
definitely.
insane. Now I look at it as just
Yeah.
complete
So
craziness.
that
And
that makes sense to how strict she would be
yes,
then, because
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
if you want to
yeah,
get to the best of heaven, then you have
exactly.
to adhere to
Right,
everything,
right.
right? And you have to make your children do that.
And to your point is we're sealed to each other. And what a sealing
Mm.
is just that we're all bonded to each other. And so it's like this one long link. And so, yeah, you don't want to be the weak
Okay.
link. You do not want to be the
Right.
weak link in Mormonism. And so, yeah, we can
Oh.
totally tear apart or break apart or whatever, unpack the
Yeah,
whole heaven structure.
we will definitely do an episode
Yeah,
on
yeah.
each denominations, your
Yeah,
denomination
that
and
would be
mine,
cool.
and talk
Yeah.
about the doctrines as well.
Yes.
Because oh man, this is such a gold
It's
mine. It's
fascinating.
very
It
fascinating.
if you look at it from an outsider now, it's almost like, wow, Joseph Smith, who's the founder of the Mormon faith, was kind of brilliant and genius in some ways. Like I kind of do believe, there's reports that he was on mushrooms at times, and I'm like, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah.
Like I can see how he created some of this stuff. And it is really fascinating and interesting. And also how much people believe in it and how then that affects how then they treat the people around them. And so I draw that's where I draw my lines is if it means that we treat people worse because they're different
Mm.
and they don't fit the mold or the scheme that has been created for us, that's where I have issues with. And I'll talk more about that later. So what else? So yeah, so my mom was very strict. My dad was also strict in a different way. Let's see, what do I want to say about my dad today? Definitely, my dad was more violent. My mom was violent too, with, believe it or not, what she was capable of. She would pull my hair if she could get a hold of it as I walked by. But my dad was mostly a physically abusive, violent person. It's how he parented, I guess, how he was able to enforce discipline. I can only compare it to myself as a mother, and I feel like it was just constantly used as a tool and excessively used. And knowing what I know now about my own children, just not effective. It made for a dynamic where I was walking on eggshells during my childhood and adolescence, not wanting to upset him. And I think that was my experience. Lots of, I don't want to say that word, but just a lot of violence, just a
Okay.
lot of hitting
Yeah, physical.
and
You don't want.
physical abuse. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
pretty
guess
much
so.
physical abuse.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. So a lot
Very
of that,
unfortunate.
obviously, that goes hand in hands with emotional abuse as well,
Yes.
because, just constantly made my mom, just constantly not feeling like I was a good kid. I just always woke up every day thinking, yep, I'm just a bad kid and I'll never
Wow.
be good in my parents' eyes. No matter what I do,
Wow.
I'm just like, I was always just at rock bottom, and to get in their good graces just seemed unattainable, just really, really difficult. And
Wow.
so that was my experience. I was a great, yeah. Did you have a question?
Oh well. I was wondering how the treatment was in contrast with your sibling
Sure.
at home. Like, did you see, was there like a difference in the treatment between yourself, or was it like kind of like a broad brush? Your parents were abusive
I
to both of you.
I can only express how I viewed it. And how
Okay.
I viewed it was my sister seemed to have way more in common from the get-go with my dad and my mom. I don't know if that is how she would describe it, but this is my podcast. So I'm going to
Yes.
speak my truth. And my truth is yes, my sister, if there was a rod to be spared, it was spared on her. And I got every inch of the rod. And
Mm.
I did see it over and over where I feel like I was picked on the most. she was able to, even in my teenage years, I had a wonderful group of friends, and I enjoyed going and spending time with my friends, hanging out with my friends. Somewhere along, I mean, just I don't know what it was. It was either control that my parents needed to have of me, but they never really encouraged it. They always found, like, if I it got to a point where if I knew I had an activity with my friends, I would wait to tell them minutes before it was to happen, because I knew if I gave them a warning of like a day, they would figure out a way to get me in trouble so that I
Wow.
couldn't go out. And so I would
Wow.
either avoid it or, whatever. My sister did not have a good group of friends. I don't know if she I don't know exactly her situation, but she never went out. She never hung out. So she was just a homebody. She was very loyal to my parents.
I
I think that they
see.
really liked that. And she also just I knew how to push buttons. I would say,
Interesting.
a typical kid that rebelled right when she should have, when she pushed back, right in her teenage years. And
Yeah.
they did not like that. My sister had a more dormant adolescence where she never did those things. And
Mm.
so my parents were like, hey, this is a great kid,
Yeah.
compared to this troublemaker. And my
Right.
sister is blonde and light-eyed and looked very
Uh,
angelic. I'm,
right.
dark brown hair,
Yeah,
brown
you were a
eyes.
daughter of Eve. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm. You're a
But
Lilith.
now as a mother, I look back and I didn't do anything remotely rebellious at all. I was just a typically, forming child. And,
What would you say your most rebellious moment was?
oh, probably saying the F word one time.
No.
Yeah, I think that was probably the worst thing that I did. I remember when I did that, oh my gosh,
Really?
I got clobbered so badly for saying the F word. Oh, I think I had a plate of food um, that I was actually serving to my parents. I had made this, and I think I said the F word out of frustration, and my dad got up and knocked this food completely out of my hands, and
Wow.
then hit me. And I
Wow.
remember then being told that I had to clean it all up off the floor. So
Wow.
I had to
So
clean up all the food
it was in
and
frustration of
of
basically
something,
too many things going
something,
on, and out
maybe.
of frustration, you
I
expressed
I
your
think I let
feelings in
the
that
F
way.
word slip,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I remember having two trays of this food that I had just prepared for my parents, because that was also a big thing for me. Was as soon Having a handicapped mother meant that as soon as I could do something, I had to do it.
Right.
So
Right.
basically, I had to do the laundry as a really young kid for my parents.
Yeah.
I had to start preparing meals for my parents because my dad would come home after a long day of work and he was tired. And if I just took on these roles. When I turned 16 in the United States, that's when you get your driver's license. And for most kids, that means, woohoo, you get to drive behind the wheel. And for
Yeah.
me, it was like, no, now I go and pick up the groceries. Now I have to, run all the family errands and take off
Wow.
things from the load of my parents. So I had to become an
Wow.
adult a lot faster. With that also
Yeah.
came a stunted childhood because I didn't learn how to ride a bike until I was 14. So I didn't have parents that would take me out and teach me how to
Mm.
ride a bike. I still don't know how to swim. And there are certain things that I never got to do that were a part of growing up. But yeah, my dad, that's how he parented. I think his style was just violence, and he was violent
Wow.
with my mom too.
I
And
see. Even as she was paralyzed in that
yep,
situation.
yeah. I think that was one of the
Wow.
hardest things for me to watch sometimes because like she couldn't really defend herself in those situations. So for me,
Wow.
that was
That's horrific.
not it was a really bad experience to see my
Wow.
mom get hit as a kid. Just because first of all, she was my mom. And even though they're your abusers, it's like there's this sick loyalty that you will always have to them.
Yes.
And that's something that you and I have talked about, where it's like it's time now to kind of share the truth, the reality of it, because I don't want to gaslight myself anymore. I
Right.
know what I lived and what I saw, and I'm not okay with it. And I want my kids to know that this is part of the tapestry that is their mother. And
Yeah.
some of these strands are darker and uglier, but they are still what make me me. And I've just
It's a
chosen,
huge, beautiful tapestry with different
thanks.
colors. Some of them are dark,
Hmm.
some of them are nice. Some of them are rainbow
Exactly.
colors and light and electricity, and some of them are
Yeah.
just kind of dark. But it
Yeah.
makes this beautiful tapestry, huge tapestry. So
Yeah.
there's a big
Yeah.
picture to it. I relate to
So
you
yeah.
a lot on the on growing up into a young adult, not having to do things that kids have
Mm,
done or
right.
would have done by that time. Like yeah, like riding a bike, knowing how to swim, knowing little things like going out, you know parties, and
Yeah.
just having a lot of inside jokes with your friends and other
Yeah.
things like that. Those are things that i I had to catch up to
Yeah.
as a grown adult,
Yeah.
and I learned how to ride a bike by peer pressure because I
Okay.
didn't want my friends
Yeah.
to see that I couldn't ride a bike at that time. So we
Right.
there was this event where they were all riding bikes, and I had to pick up a bike, and I fell so many times, and I was teased, rightly so.
Yeah.
I was like, "How
Right.
are you 16 and you can't ride a bike? You should have been riding bikes by when you were like 12, you know?" And it's
Yeah.
like, well,
I know.
so I had to learn through those situations, and yeah, so I relate to you on those things, and
Yeah.
it's a lot of the unwilling to have other people have control over your children, or not even control, have influence over your children.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you stay home and you are loyal to
Yes.
them, it's you are a
Yes.
good kid, right? Because
Correct.
you
Yeah.
allow only us to have influence over you.
Correct.
But when
That's right.
as a child you're supposed to go out in the world and let the world also influence you in some way,
Yeah.
and your parents are to guide you with whatever
Yeah.
influence that basically is being given to you, because that's that's what they are for. That's what your parents are there for, to guide whatever you're being influenced
Yeah.
by in a way
Yeah.
that you are protected and you are loved in that
Yeah.
situation. So it's very unfortunate when dysfunctional family system does that. They are mainly focused on control
Yes.
and
Yeah.
loyalty,
Yes.
and that's the only way, that's the only way they see you through those lenses.
Yes.
You are not loyal,
No.
or you are loyal, and if you're not
Yes.
loyal, then you're good, then you're not good. If you're loyal, then
Yeah.
you're good, regardless of
Yeah.
however it's actually being affecting you, how you're
Yeah.
affected by it.
Right. In my household, it was very clear from day one that I owed my parents everything. Good
Yeah.
grades, don't embarrass us. I remember one time my dad had hit my face so hard that I had a bloody nose, and
Wow.
I ran out of the house. I ran out
Wow.
of the house, and it was one of the first times I'd ever done that. I ran out just because I was afraid that it was just going to get worse, and I was so scared. And so I ran out,
Wow.
and I remember my dad came outside and was yelling for me to come back. And I was going to run up the street. And there's this wonderful woman that is still really close to me today. And I was so close to getting to her house. And I really wanted to go in her house. But in that moment, I was like, he was telling me to come back. And I know that in that moment, I just was like, if I go to this person, it's probably gonna, again, and I think I was an adolescent. I definitely was a teenager at this point. And I just remember thinking, if I go and I ask for help, it's going to cause problems. I just know
Yeah.
it. So it's better I just turn around and go back home. And I did.
Yeah.
And I turned around and I went back home. And I think for the longest time, I really believed that loyalty and protecting my mom and dad was what I was supposed to do. That's
Yeah.
what my job was as a kid. That was what I owed to them. And it was always, that was always how it was, that I owed my parents everything. And I definitely have a different view for my own children, where I've honestly felt this way from the day that each of them were born. I looked at them and I just felt, no, I owe you everything I can possibly give you. If I can give you even just a little bit of an easier life than the one that I had, I hope to be able to give that to you. I don't look at any of my children as owing me anything. I want them to be respectful and I want them to love me, but I feel like it's up to me to create an environment where that's freely given, not,
Yeah. Yes.
in any kind of bondage or in any kind of situation. So for me, that's how it was growing up. And I really, really just struggled in that household. And
I can imagine. Yeah.
yeah, and I couldn't wait to leave. But I did have a great group of friends. So shout out to all
Mm,
my friends. You know who you are from
yeah.
high school. I had such a great group of friends. I think that they saved me on many occasions, just how
Wow.
I had just so much fun with them, and they were a great group of friends. And along the way, I did have a few mentors, kind of like this one lady that lived up the street, who's, just also, she kind of went against the grain of Mormonism. And maybe I'll share a little bit about that in another time. But to me, I just looked at her always with such awe. But yeah, I had good people. I was a good student. And I got into the schools, sorry, not the schools, the church's university, which is Brigham Young University.
I see.
And it's really, really, I mean, it kind of it signals to the rest of the community that you're pretty much an upstanding Mormon if you get
Mm,
accepted into Brigham Young University.
interesting.
And so getting into that university what was pretty much my only option. There was a moment where so I wanted to be a nurse. That's what I thought I was going to be. And there were 18-month universities or colleges that I could go to and get the same degree as I would have gotten by going to this 4-year school. And I remember at one point I tried to approach my parents and say, could I maybe go to this? Could I try to go to this university instead of Brigham Young? And for them, it was just status, like, no, absolutely
Right.
not. You're going to go to Brigham Young University. Our kids go there. And
Yeah.
my sister was pretty much finished by the time I was going to get accepted. And
I
so,
see. So she
so
went to
she had
Brigham
already
Young.
gone.
Okay.
Yep, she went to Brigham
What
Young.
what what did
That's
she do in Brigham Young?
She studied communications. So
Okay.
she wanted to be a journalist at that time.
I see.
Ironically, now she is a nurse and she actually went to one of those schools afterwards. And
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
no, my sister, my relationship with my sister was always one where I just always thought she was the coolest thing. And I wanted to be her friend. And we did fight like normal kids, but ultimately, she always just knew how to dress so cool. And I was
Mm.
always wanting to take stuff out of her closet, which drove her crazy. But it was just because she just knew how she just was. I just thought she was amazing. And I remember when she went off to university, she pulled away even more from me. It was always a very tense relationship where I feel like I probably was pulling more for her to be in my life, and she was kind of pushing me away and wanted her own identity. And
Right.
I just
Okay.
was the little sister that wanted to tag along and
I
just
see.
do that. But when she went to university, she that's when I think she really started to develop friendships, and which is great. Now looking back, it's like she didn't really have that growing up or in high school. So
Mm.
that started to form for her, but that unfortunately pushed us even further apart because I remember she was home for Christmas break one time and I asked her, I said, I consider you my best friend. Do you consider me your best friend? And she was like, no, not really. And I remember that that kind of
Oh,
stung. But at the same time, looking back now, I and looking at my kids and everything, I think that's when she was finally on her own developing herself
yeah.
and so she was forming her own friendships, but I always thought the world of her. But my sister, very much like my dad, I think just has a very abrasive personality and just struggles with relationships.
Mm.
And I just think that is as a whole, just as a family in general, both my dad and my sister and my mom, the three of them to the extended family, and I've lumped myself into that, just have had difficult relationships just because of their personalities
Mhm.
and how they relate to people. And that's just, how they were. And I was different. I was always different from day one. For some reason, I think I was I really don't know. I asked one of my aunts a few years ago. I was like, why am I so different? Why did I come out so different from my sister, my dad, and my mom? And she told me, ever since you were a little girl, I saw you watch how other people behaved and kind of like I collected things in a basket. I saw something in someone and I took it and I put it in my basket. And I saw something
Mm,
like this lady that lived up the street or even my aunt or my uncles or whatever. I saw what I liked and I took it and I created what I wanted. And I don't know
yeah.
why my brain made me do that, but I did that and I saw things and I still do that now. So like when I spend even time with you and you and I talk and I see things in Evans that I'm like, "Ooh, I want to be more like Evans in that." And so I just take what I can and I did take also from my sister and my dad and my mom.
Mm,
I took what good that I did see in them and I apply it. Unfortunately, there were so many toxic, unhealthy cycles that I had to break that I didn't take much, but I
mm,
did from other people. And that's how I think I turned out the way that I did. Also, when I left my home at about the age of 21, 22, like when I fully left my home, I think that was a really good thing for me because I no longer was in their
right.
constant
Obviously.
influence. My sister didn't choose that path. She's always been close to home, very, very close to them. And I pretty much left at 22 and until now.
So
And so I was able,
is this
yeah.
you leaving the
So
home?
I left at university when I was 17. So from
Right.
17 to about 21, I was pretty much at the university. The first year was really, really effed up. We'll probably talk about that another time in
Of
detail, but
course.
that year was pretty bad. And that was my year at university, my first year. And then the last years at university, yeah, I was still more at home. But then my final year at university, I was able to get an internship in Italy. And this
Ah,
internship, so my specialty, I ended up, instead of doing nursing, I ended up choosing social work as my
okay.
undergrad. And what I specifically focused my education on was on rape and sexual assault. So
See.
I worked at different organizations that helped survivors of rape and sexual assault. And what I did was in Italy in 2006, this was the year that I went to do this internship in Italy. And it was going to be half of it in the United States, half of it in Italy. And the reason for that was in 2006, it was the 10-year anniversary of when rape became a crime in Italy. Believe it or not, it
Say
was only,
when
yeah,
again?
in 1996, rape became a crime in Italy.
Right.
And
Okay.
so I know it sounds really crazy, but before that, it was kind of like a sin that you would have to just go talk to your priest about, and it was kind of handled within the family.
Oh.
But in 1996, it became prosecuted. It allowed for
Prosecutable.
prosecution,
Right.
prosecutable, exactly.
Right.
And so when I went on the scene, it was their 10-year anniversary, and I was doing a comparative study between the programs that are in the United States that have been around for far longer versus in in Italy that it was just kind of emerging. And so I got
Okay.
yeah, so I got to do this really cool study, and I got to experience how both countries worked on in their social work programs in assisting people that had been victimized by rape or sexual assault. And pretty much that's the work that I have only done as an adult is working with victims of rape and sexual assault. And when I
That's
got this
awesome.
internship, yeah, yeah, so we'll have to talk about that too.
Yeah, definitely.
It feels like a past life now, it was an amazing experience, and part of that came with moving back to Italy to do this, to be out there and working at this hospital that I worked at, and that is where I reconnected with the man I ended up marrying, and
I see. In
our
Italy, you
families
did.
in Italy. Yes. So
Okay.
our families. So, like I shared with you, my dad. So my mother-in-law right now, I mean, just so that the flow of the story makes sense, I am separated
Mhm.
from my ex. And so basically when I talk about mother-in-law or father-in-law, they're like eventually going to be my ex father
Right.
and mother-in-law, but there's still people in my life that played a significant role. So my father-in-law, my mother-in-law was one of the first people to join the Mormon faith after the mission opened in Italy. Yeah, so she was the third. And then I think the year after, my father-in-law joined, and the year after that, my dad joined. That's how I want to say it, but I probably have it wrong. The point is, they were among the very first to join the faith, and they pretty much ran it out there. And they were friends. And so when I went back to Italy to do my internship, my ex's family was also, welcoming, and they had me over, and that's where he and I met for the, no, well, I want to go back. We did not meet. Okay, let me go back. Basically we were childhood friends. We don't remember each other because, like I said, I moved out to the United States when I was 7, but we had that connection. So when we met as adults, it was like, hey, like we're old family friends and everything. And so we were both of the same faith, but also of the same cultural background, which was really something that was important to us
Right.
because
Right.
he often told me that he probably couldn't have married a full American because, there's just a lot of differences. But the fact that
Yes.
I was half kind of helped us connect, and we did watch the same TV shows as children, the
All right.
same anime, so we had some similarities that we had growing up together, and our families knew each other, and we shared a very strong connection because of the faith. At that
I
time, he
see.
had just returned home from his mission. He served his in Greece, and so he spent 2 years in Greece, and I was out there, and he had just gotten home, and we became good friends and chose to get married. And again, part of that is just there's a lot involved in that we can talk about another time, but we got married in the Switzerland temple. You have to get
Okay.
married in a temple, and the
Okay.
closest one at that time, Italy now has a temple, but at the time Switzerland was the closest one, and so we got married
Okay.
there. He had not done university, so we were trying to figure out how he was going to get an education. And so he got accepted to Brigham Young University. And he was the first member of his family to get accepted into the Lord's School. And so
I see.
that's how it was called. And so we moved back out to the United States, and that allowed him to get his degree in technology. And after that, we just went from one career opportunity to another, which led us all over the United States. So we lived in
Hmm.
Connecticut, which was on the East Coast, just very close to New York. Then we lived in California, very close to San Francisco, the Bay Area. And then after that, we also lived a few years in Texas. Now we live in Virginia. So pretty much,
Just
if,
traveling
yeah,
around.
all
Yeah,
over.
all
I've
over.
seen all of the United States. We actually also lived for a period of time in Ireland, so not too far from the
Oh,
UK. Yeah.
okay.
So,
Wow, that's
yeah,
far from
so
you. Okay.
yeah, so got to experience different cultures and different parts of the United States, and landed now in Virginia. I have 5 amazing children that have come from this marriage, and they are the
That's
best.
amazing. Yes.
They are all boys. And so they, as
That's
of
incredible.
date, yeah, my oldest is 16. When he was really young, we knew something wasn't right. And it wasn't really until, okay, so I have a 16-year-old right now, a 14-year-old, 13, 10 and 8, all boys. And my oldest, he has autism. But when he was really little, we did not know what was going on. We just knew it was hard. It was just every
Mm,
moment of every day was hard. He didn't smile. It just felt not rewarding. And it wasn't
mm,
until I had my other children that I was like, why are they smiling? Why is this enjoyable? Why is
mm.
this fun? And it wasn't until he was about 3 years old that we got him diagnosed and we finally figured out what was happening to him.
Wow.
And no fault of his own. This is just how his developmental path
Right.
needed to go. But he's come leaps and bounds. He was nonverbal up until he was about 6 years old and
Wow.
he struggled to potty train. It wasn't until he was, yeah, much older than a typical child that he hit certain developmental milestones. And but eventually he hit them. It's so funny, Evans, that I'm telling you this because it was so hard. And the people that if anybody listens to this and was there during those early years, he was a very, challenging little boy.
Hmm.
But now he's the easiest kid. He is acing all his grades. He's in a program where he's going to graduate with what's called an associate degree, which is
Wow.
not quite a bachelor's degree, but he's going to graduate high school
Yes.
with
With an
basically,
associate's degree.
yeah,
That's
he's so
impressive.
smart. He's very smart.
Wow.
I would say if he's outgrown the autism to the point of possibly just being Asperger's, just a very high functioning autistic person.
Interesting.
I feel like it's always going to be a part of him. It's what makes him him. I don't look at it as a bad thing. He's just
Right.
come so far with it, but it has definitely been a challenge. Having that also be your first child kind of sets you
Yes.
up for like, whoa, most people would say like if you had a child with a special need as your first kid, you kind of stop having kids because you have to focus so much
So much
attention
attention.
to
Yeah.
that child. But we were in the Mormon faith and you don't do
You
that. You
had
keep
to have
having kids.
children.
You
Yeah.
have to keep having kids. And so we did and we want and we wanted to have a large family. My ex, he comes from a very large family. He was one of seven. I was one of two. If I didn't get along with my sister, I didn't have anybody else to play with. I love the dynamic in his household where there was always somebody to play with. And so I was like, yeah, I'll have a large family. And with interestingly enough, we really struggled to have him. We had to do a lot of fertility treatments to have him, which is so, again, it's so funny. It feels like a lifetime ago, but those years were really hard. To conceive a baby was really hard for us, and we had to do all kinds of things, all the way up to IVF. Luckily, we were able to conceive him before we had to do IVF, but we did pretty much
Oh wow.
everything that came before that. And so after we had this, we were like, okay, we just want a family. How do we have our family grow, but we don't want to have to go through all the poking and prodding and all the drugs and all the medicines that we had to go
Right.
through
Right.
to get this. And so we were like, we're both comfortable with the idea of adoption. So let's just adopt and we'll have two children and that'll be the route that works for us. And I also have an aunt and uncle that struggled to conceive, and they adopted four children from India. And so to me, difference in color of skin just was not an issue. I was like, I just want to be a mom. That's all I care about. I don't care what the child looks like. Just, I'm good. And we were presented after going through the adoption process with an opportunity to adopt this little black baby boy.
Yes.
And we flew out, and he was in my arms at 6 hours. And at 22 hours, I was officially his mother. So we adopted um, our second son. Yeah, and so I will tell you more about him in another episode, but he also had some delays, but such a sweet little boy, and also was very challenging as a little kid. But now he towers over me. He's over 6 feet tall, and
Wow.
I'm 5'2" on a good day, and
With two
he's
heels.
just yeah, I know, on tippy toes. But he's just a joy as well. He's come leaps and bounds, does really well at school, and obviously is very athletic and loves sports and just also just a joy. And then I have my next oldest son who does more drama and theater, and then who is, by the way, he calls himself the producer of this show.
Oh,
He make
right.
yes.
Okay. I
He
was wondering when we are going to get producer,
yeah,
but
get a
hey, here we go.
producer. He's already wanting to help me
Yeah.
set up lighting and everything. So he
Awesome.
does that. Yeah. So and then I have my 10-year-old and my 8-year-old, and those three children, relatively speaking, came with no intervention from medical
Oh
professionals.
wow.
So, as interesting as that is, it was like we really struggled to get my oldest, and then we adopted the second, and then with no drugs, no help, 13 months after I had my second son, we had our third. So I had three children in the span of 36 months,
Wow.
which was a lot.
Wow, that is a
It was
lot.
it was crazy, especially because one of them was nonverbal and he
I
was more
see.
delayed than the children that were more typical. And so
Right.
it created a very stressful dynamic, and we had no help because
Hmm.
my mother was paralyzed. Even if I lived next door to her, I wouldn't have been able to ask for help because she couldn't
Right.
hold a
Right.
baby. She would have struggled to hold a baby.
That's a very
And
difficult
she
situation, yeah.
yeah, and so typically in a typical family, you have babies, you live close to home, so mom and dad can lend you a
Can
hand.
help,
I
yeah.
didn't have that. I didn't have that
Wow.
possibility. And the fact that we lived in the United States created a barrier from us and my ex-husband's family.
See.
So there's that. But the United States presented itself with a lot of advantages where the day-to-day living is easier compared to one in Italy.
Italy.
And so we kind of had to weigh out the cost versus the benefits. And so we made it work, and we raised these five amazing children, and they are really the thing that I'm the most proud of, the thing that I feel like I didn't give up a career as per the faith. The mom does have to make these kinds of sacrifices. Looking back now, yeah, I see that there was a great cost on my personhood by
Mhm.
making that choice, but I'm not gonna look back on it as I have five amazing people that I get to hang out with on a regular basis
You
that I
got,
get to watch
yeah,
grow up.
you got something to show for it, basically. So
Yes.
so that
I
makes sense.
really
Yeah.
I hope so. I feel a great responsibility that I'm going to send out these five men into the world, and I take that very seriously because I want them to go out into the world and treat women the right way and to treat others the right way.
Mm.
And all of that stems from my tapestry. You know, what I
Yes.
witnessed, what I saw, what I experienced, and also leaving my faith, the toxic things about the religion that I do not want that cycle to continue
Yeah.
if I can have any kind of influence in that. Of course, it's their path, it's their journey. And as we've already said, they do not owe me anything. I owe them, though, everything I can possibly give to them. So if that means educating them and giving them full information so that they can make an informed decision on so many things, whether that's
Yeah.
related to the faith or anything else in life, I
Amazing.
choose that.
That's
So,
amazing, Ali. Like the things that you've been able to do with them, with all that you've experienced with your hardships, family and relationship wise, individual relationships that you've had, and then to be able to watch these five soldiers just spring out, and they just keep growing to tall trees, and you just see
yeah.
them. You're trying to mold them to the as straight tortoise as much as you can, and it's just like, wow,
Oh,
this is amazing. You've done such a great work, you know, like, and this is something that you should tap yourself on the back. I know it can be very difficult because it's still an ongoing process, but
yes.
it's really something that you should sit back and look with a smile on your face.
I joke and I say that I have a college fund for each of my children, but I also have a therapy fund for each of my
Oh
children
boy.
because I don't know how I'm screwing them up. But I know that
Wow.
I took the parenting playbook from my mom and dad and I pretty
Mm,
much did the exact opposite in every possible thing.
it's
In
amazing.
everything that they did, I did the opposite. So I have broken these cycles of violence. I've broken I try my darndest to give them the attention that they wanted. An example is, so I really, okay, this is silly, but when I was a child, if you had asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I wanted to be an actress. I just was convinced that I was the next big thing.
Of
And
course.
I wanted to be a Jessica Chastain. I wanted to be this, I wanted to sing. I wanted to be a triple threat. I wanted to dance. I wanted to sing. I wanted to act. And I begged my parents, I wanted to take this acting class. And I wore them down to the point where they allowed me to do it. And I did it, and it was just a very brief taste of this acting class. And at the end of the session, the acting teachers approached my parents and said, "Hey, she's actually really good. Why don't you sign her up for to continue and have this continue?"
Uh-oh.
And they said no.
Uh-oh.
And I remember that was really, really hard because I remember overhearing the conversation and how my acting teacher was really um, speaking quite positively about me. And I didn't get a lot of that. And
Wow.
so, like, I was just so used to always just being bad and no good. And hearing that, I was really excited. And they didn't want to do it. And so I didn't get to do that. And it's funny because,
What was their
yeah.
reasoning? What was their reasoning for that?
They just said the reasoning my mom gave me was like, oh, they just say that to everybody just to get their money. And so
Oh, okay.
basically in one sentence, they squashed any future that I had in something I wanted to do. But then
Mm.
they also basically told me I really wasn't good. I really wasn't
Wow.
an actress because basically they were saying that's just a sales tactic. You're not really good. That's just your teacher trying to sell us another session.
Wow.
And so I was like, okay, I guess that's over. And so
Wow.
I had to be level-headed, and I had to take care of my mom and I had to take care of the house
Wow.
and do all the things that a housewife would do from a very, very early age, clean, cook. That was my responsibility. And I didn't get to do that, but here we are. I just turned 40, and a few months before I turned 40, I enrolled myself in an acting class. And you
Yes.
know about this. So it's like now I have still absolutely no talent, no ambition. Maybe my parents were not completely wrong there, but I'm trying and I go to this, class and I've actually found a great deal of joy in being able to do this acting class. I don't think I'm getting any better. My acting teacher will probably be like, I don't know, maybe she'd say good things, but
I don't think you are without talent. That's such a drastic
just a
idea to
very
have of
little talent.
yourself.
Just very
Well,
little talent.
yeah, well maybe, but yeah, it's really fun to hear that you are
Yeah.
revisiting something that
Yeah.
you were unwilling to drop, you were made to drop.
Yeah.
But I
Yes.
think one thing that you should definitely go easy on yourself is doing this after, spending your life
Yeah.
trying to re-educate yourself on how to bring up your children,
Yes.
going through therapy
Yeah.
to like detach yourself from the parenting skills that you learned from your parents,
Hmm.
and that
That's right.
takes talent as well.
Oh,
Okay,
thank
that
you.
takes a lot of talent to be able to do that, because some people are incredibly tone deaf to
Mm.
how their behavior affect people,
Yeah.
so that's also talent. Okay.
Yeah.
On top of that, you're a great parent, and also is the fact that you never know what would have happened if you were enrolled in the acting,
True.
when you
Yeah.
were a kid, because
Sure.
not every, like, think of many actors who receive awards and are celebrities and are celebrated today. Like,
Yeah.
I would say only a handful of them are really good actors. Like, I would say, like,
Okay.
top of the crop actors. And yet here are so many of these people celebrated as celebrities, and they get
Yeah.
awards still. I just think being in the right place at the right time and be
Impacts that.
yeah, it really impacts that. So I don't think
Yeah.
you should be so hard on yourself.
I'm
And
not. I mean, not with
don't.
the acting. It's not like I really thought I would do anything, but I'm proud of myself.
It's improv, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
That's the
improv
best thing.
and it's mostly improv. And the beauty is that I now get this second chance at life.
Yeah,
I look at it as my second act. I look at it as
act
from
two.
here on out, act two of my play
Yeah,
and of my performance. And I now get to take all the good with me that I have taken up to now. And I have no regrets, not a single regret at all. I did the best that I could at the time and with what I had. And I have now made certain choices that I'm hoping will, allow me to live authentically. And that's been the biggest thing for me, leaving the Mormon faith, which only happened about um, two, almost 3 years ago.
yeah,
About 3 years ago, I made the official decision. I remember just years of this, years of questioning and not fitting in. I think that was my biggest thing is that I always felt like this just isn't working for me. This just doesn't fit in. My ex, on the other hand, he presented really well in the Mormon faith and it
yeah.
seemed to work for him and his family, it worked for them. And even for my sister, from what I saw, it just worked. And for me, no matter how hard I tried, I felt this just does not fit. And there were little things along the way also. Like I could never understand why my grandma, who I told you was like the sweetest woman, but because she was a Roman Catholic, why she wasn't going to be going to the same heaven as we were because she
Right.
wasn't a member of the faith. And I was like, but she's so much nicer. She's so much better
Wow.
than my mom and dad. And so it was like the mental gymnastics that I had to do in my head just didn't compute for a long time. And also because I did travel the world and I did go to different areas, I was like, I met people and I saw people and I was
Yeah.
like, how are these people not going to be in God's graces the same way as a Mormon would? And honestly, here was the biggest thing. This was the biggest catalyst for me. So, the Mormon faith, one thing that we can get into in this episode is the Mormon faith only integrated Black and white people in 1978. So,
Yeah.
we are talking just a few years before I was born.
Wow.
And to me, I always was told, yes, that was for a reason, for a time. We don't talk about it, don't look into it or whatever. I have a black son. I have a black son that is coming of age. And in the Mormon faith, when you turn 11, 12 years of age, you get what's called the priesthood if you are a male.
Hmm.
Now, part of this issue was that in up until 1978, black people could not have the priesthood. Not only could they not have the priesthood, but they also could not be sealed as families. And again, the
Wow.
sealing is like the ultimate pinnacle of achievement. You want to be
Wow.
sealed as 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 a family. And so here I have this son who's black and who is becoming a young man, and has questions. And I don't know the answers to these questions. I better educate myself on why the Mormon faith did not allow black people. And when you start to read the actual language that the prophets were using towards black people, that's when the cognitive dissonance was very strong because
Wow.
it would describe, we would have these leaders that were supposed to be talking for God, basically describing black people as flat nosed, ugly, unintelligent. And I've had this little baby since he was 6 hours old. You're very handsome, Evans. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
I'm looking at my
You're
flat
just fine.
nose
You're
and
just
my
fine.
ugly face. Yeah.
No, no, no. Exactly. They are all signs of, your lack of intelligence. Therefore, you needed to be subjugated. You needed to be a slave. You needed to be lesser than because
Mm.
you are this way. You have the stain of Cain. And so, but I've had this baby that I've raised since he was 6 hours old, and I didn't see any of that. In fact, I would argue he sometimes astounds me at how smart he is. He's
Mm.
smarter. I mean, hopefully he doesn't let this go to his head, but sometimes he's smarter than his mother. And he is an amazing person. And that just, I was like, mm-mm, no. And so then what did I do after basically pulling that apart? I did it with gays and homosexuals and the LGBTQ community. I really struggled growing up
Mm.
with how even my mom was very homophobic and very against gay people. And for me, that never made sense because I was like, these people are just like you and me. They just choose to love differently. And as long as they're not hurting anybody, why is it any of my business to dictate how they should live their lives? And in the Mormon faith, you can't even entertain a relationship like that. It is better to die
Mm.
celibate and single than to ever be in a mutually loving relationship. So,
Yeah.
all of these things, as I slowly started tearing them apart and then looking into the history of the Mormon faith and realizing how its origins came to pass and basically it all fell apart. I do want to share this part of my story. Evans, I'm not sure I've ever shared this with you, but one of the big catalysts for my faith to start getting shaken was for about 3 years, my ex and I tried to adopt two little girls from Taiwan. Have I
Okay.
told you this?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. So my two girls were in Taiwan, and for a period of 3 years, we spoke with them over Skype, and we actually went out to Taiwan for a period of a month.
Oh wow.
Um, and we got to meet them, and I got to put them to bed every night, and I got to spend time with them. And unfortunately, the adoption agency that we were working with ended up being not a good agency, and
Oh.
they broke up the adoption and took our money, and we lost contact with our
Oh.
girls.
Oh wow.
And
Sorry about that. That's
and it was
unfortunate.
very I I'll tell you how I've come out of it because at the time it was devastating because one of the things that in the Mormon faith gets done a lot is the men will put their hands on your head on anybody and they can give you a blessing. And that
I see.
blessing is basically the man is just the vessel, but it's coming to you from God. And so God was telling me over and over again that I was going to be the mother of these two girls and that I was supposed to bring them home and bringing them
Oh
to
wow.
righteousness and to bring them to the fold and that I was going to be sealed to them. So when all of that fell apart, obviously I was like, well, what about all the things God told me?
Uh-oh.
Uh-huh. And so it was like, where'd you go, God? And I
Uh-oh.
would pray to him and I would be like, God, I am only doing what you asked me to do. You asked me to bring these girls home and I spent all this money and like I've worked and also how can you do this to these girls? They've been waiting for parents for all these years like
Yes.
because they weren't babies. They were older. They were 6 and 7, I think by the time I met them
Mm.
they may have been 9 and 10. They were older. And they were biological sisters and my world fell apart because
Wow.
my connection got cut with God in that moment when I
Oh
lost my
wow.
girls. And I begged him, I would pray on hands and knees until my knees were raw, like, please, like, I want my girls, please bring them back to me. And nothing worked. We got lawyers involved for a year. We tried to pursue, you know, and nothing worked. And
Maybe God was testing you.
maybe God was testing me, but at that point, I would say he was a pretty much a bad word that I'm not going to say because at that point I was like, how can you mess? Like it's one thing to mess with an adult woman,
Hmm.
but these girls were abandoned twice now.
Wow.
They were abandoned by their biological parents. Then they grew attached to me and my ex, and now you're going to do this again to them? Like That's not somebody. And on top
Yeah.
of it, I'm learning at this time, after this time, that you also looked at my black son as inferior.
Hmm.
I,
Only
I,
for a
I
time,
can't.
though.
Only for a
1970, he changed his
time.
mind.
Exactly. He did
He's
change his mind.
yeah.
And all of these things compounded to a point where, and also having some friends that are of a different sexual orientation, all of it just compounded into,
Mm,
like, I need to deconstruct this for myself, and I need to
interesting.
not allow myself to be limited to what the church allows me to read. And so once I gave myself permission to read anything and everything, it was just a snowball effect. The house of cards came down, and unfortunately, it took a great toll also on my marriage.
Wow.
And and it was a very difficult time period, but again, coming out of it, I now get to love whoever I want and be as authentic as I want to be. I feel I don't have to judge anymore. Now I can just love everybody for what they bring to the table. And I felt, honestly, it was so much more work being in the faith, all the things. And now I get to show up as Allie, and I get to love, and I get to help people, and I get to bring from this experience. And here's the most beautiful part, Evans. So the Mormon faith teaches that we're not families if we're not sealed to one another. And so the
Wow.
most devastating thing
Wow.
for me was not bringing these two girls home because I
Yes.
didn't get to be sealed to them. And nobody had any words of comfort for me because if I had had a baby and that baby died, I naturally am sealed to them just by birth.
Right.
But I
Okay.
did not give birth to these children. And even
Yes.
with Henry, he wasn't mine. I had to go and do a whole ceremony in the temple for him to become sealed to me.
I see.
Okay.
I see.
And I would have needed to do that with my girls. But nobody had any words of comfort after everything fell apart. And so, but the most beautiful thing is that when I learned that the Mormon faith is just made up and that it's not real and there is no Mormon heaven and none of this is true, my time with my girls was of value. And I'm not a failure because I didn't bring them home and they're not sealed to me. I
Hmm.
was meant to be a part of their life for that period. And I hope that when they become adults, because right now they are 12 and 13, but when they become
Yeah.
adults, perhaps our paths will cross again. And if
Exactly.
they
Who
ever listen to this
knows?
podcast, they will know how much they meant to me and that I love them and that I fought for them and that I would do the same now and that I wish them well. And I'm not any less their mother just because I'm not sealed to them. I still think of them often. I have their pictures in my bedroom that I look
Wow.
at every day because they will always be a part of my life and they will know and hopefully have felt love for the time that I did have them in my life. And even if I just have a great friendship with them when we're adults, when we're all adults, I would love that. I would welcome that. And it doesn't matter to me that we're not sealed. But
Mm.
in Mormonism, it's so stressed. That is like the ultimate thing is to be sealed. And to the point where as soon as like my grandma passed away, you have to wait about a year to have them sealed to you. So you can't do it
Oh.
while they're alive because they are choosing not to become Mormons. So after they die, you wait a year,
Oh.
you baptize them for the dead, and then you can seal them
I
to the rest of the
see.
family. So it's this sick stressing
Wow.
of
Wow.
connection when I'll be honest with you, Evans, I don't want to be sealed to my abusers.
Oof. That's a
So,
bar.
f- so for
That's
me,
a bar.
it's like, for me, leaving the Mormon faith has only come with, oh, none of that is real. None of that matters. And really, what matters is being good right now, not for an afterlife. My parents could beat the crap out of me and call themselves good Mormons going to the celestial kingdom of the afterlife.
Mm.
I don't give a crap about that in this life. because I'm living heaven on earth with my babies, with my children right
Yeah.
now. I'm taking care of them and I'm trying my best to make sure that every day feels like heaven for them. I squeeze them a little bit tighter. I love on them just a little bit more because I don't believe that there is a next life or that tomorrow is even a given. And
Yeah.
so I don't treat people that way. And I make it a point to show up as best as I can. Of course, I have bad days. Some days I don't get enough sleep. Some days I'm grouchy and I say things that I shouldn't say. But
Yeah.
overwhelmingly, my goal is to be as good as I possibly can to the people that are around me. And I don't have to live in a way that needs control. I don't need to control my children because they have a good mom and they can come to me whenever they need me. And if they choose to be rebellious, don't tell them, but sometimes I it makes me happy because I feel like, hey, you're challenging the system and that tells me that you're thinking and I welcome that. I'm still in charge and you have to go to bed and you
Of
have to brush
course.
your teeth, but I I actually look at that as, hey, you're hitting those developmental marks and I'm proud of you for that.
Yeah.
And instead, my upbringing was always hell. And I would
Wow.
rather live heaven on earth here than to um than to wish for a heaven where we're sealed to each other, but these people were not good to us. Why would I want that? Why would I want to go to a heaven like that? I would much rather live a meaningful life here
Mhm.
and do good here than to 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 be a facade
Yeah.
for a faith that isn't true and that behind closed doors you can behave however you want to, but out in front of everybody you're trying to be this perfect family and
Yes.
when it's not true. So I don't
This
know, Evans.
is
I think this is a good place to
powerful.
stop, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This is powerful. And ladies and gentlemen, Ali, like she is awesome. Now you guys understand why we are both doing this. There's so much that we could talk about. You've done so well, giving us at least surface level how your journey has led you to this place being an amazing mother of five strong soldiers. Well, they're not soldiers literally, guys. It's just a title I
No,
give to them. They're all like 7 foot tall. It's just incredible.
they are
Uh,
not. Unfortunately, the ones that I produced are the ones that are gonna be the shortest. We've got the Italian genes. We're not gonna be very tall. They're
They've
not
got
gonna
the
be very
Italian
tall.
genes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Nice accent.
I try. I
Yeah.
try. I watch The Sopranos, so
Oh, okay. Sopranos are Americans. That is not Italian culture. Okay, Evans, no. No. No, 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 no. We're I'm no.
Here we
So you're
go.
gonna have to
Here we go.
watch some
I
more.
have to be re-educated. Yes, I
Yes,
have to
you
be
do.
re-educated.
Yeah, no. I'm like the cream of the crop Italian. None of this
Yes.
American second, fourth, fifth generation Italian. I literally was born there. So I take my Italian heritage very seriously.
I understand
So
that. I retrace my steps, and I will learn from the original, the original, the
yes,
mother of Italy.
there
Yes,
you
yes, yes.
go.
I will do that. But
Yeah.
Ali, this has been great, and I'm looking forward to having so many
Yeah.
more conversations about this, and we're definitely going to have a deep dive into motherhood as
Okay.
an ex-Mormon. We're going to have a deep
Yeah.
dive
Yeah.
into just the Mormon faith as a whole, and as
Yeah.
we're going to have a deep dive into the Seventh Day Adventist faith as well with time,
Yes. Yeah.
and to see how
Yeah.
you know we all came out of it and how things were when we were in it and how things
Yeah.
were when we were out of it, and I am looking forward to it.
And I think every episode will be a peeling back of the layers that are Evans and Allie, and what we bring to
Definitely.
the table. And I think you and I have come to an understanding of like, we connect so well together. And I just think people will kind of start to see that we are going to talk about different lived experiences that are different, but also bring us together.
Yeah.
And I think that with every episode, we're going to strip back and show people more about us. I don't know. I'm
Yes.
not being very eloquent right now, but the
Ali
point
is
is,
not being very eloquent, guys. That's what's happening.
yes, that is what's happening. So it's better we end it here. And yeah, and we'll see what we talk about next time.
Yeah,
So
we have so much to talk about, and I'll be asking you more questions, and hopefully you have some questions for me as well. Next
absolutely.
episode, a conclusion to what I started in episode one,
Yeah.
as well, because I need to kind of close
Circle
in,
back
circle back to
and talk to about some more things. Sure.
yes, and even how I left the Seventh Day Adventist faith as well.
Yeah, did
Um,
we even cover that?
yeah, I don't think we covered that. I
No.
think that was there
Yeah.
was a lot of back information that was given.
Yeah.
But
That's okay.
yeah, yeah, of course. It's our
Yeah.
podcast. We do whatever we want with it.
We want. That's right.
But I hope that people that are listening are enjoying this and they relate to it in some way or another. And if you do, leave your comments, and we hopefully we will read them. If you have anything
Yeah.
that you want to say to us, you can also leave it in the comments, or you can email us. By the time we do this video, we will probably have an email address as well. So it's still a work in
Yeah,
progress. We
it
this is the
is.
skeleton. You see the skeleton.
It
Very soon
is.
you start seeing the meat and the bone and the ligaments and everything, and it will
Yeah.
be a full picture soon, a full tapestry. Hey, there we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey, and thanks, Evans. I really appreciated you listening and facilitating that conversation because this is something, that I kind of want to leave behind one day. So I appreciate it.
You're
So
very
thank
welcome.
you.
I'm honored that I was able to be the one to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.